Welcome to Module 6 of the ANDVSA Statewide Primary Prevention Orientation. In Modules 4 and 5, we discussed how we can work collaboratively on DVSA prevention, how we identify local risk and protective factors or conduct a needs assessment, and how to collaboratively develop a local DVSA prevention plan with measurable goals and outcomes. During this module, we will discuss our action steps for working on prevention of domestic violence and sexual assault and stopping violence in our communities before it ever starts. We will look at activities, strategies, and programs and how we can design them with the greatest effectiveness. Now that we know where we're going, it makes it easier to decide how to get there through specific activities and strategies. To begin this module, we will go over some of the terminology related to prevention efforts. Next, we will revisit the PIES framework, which we introduced in Module 4, and discuss how it can figure into carrying out prevention efforts. Because the development of these strategies will take some special consideration due to local context or capacity of organizations and the community, we will go over the 9 principles of prevention, the considerations that we should all be keeping in mind when designing prevention programming. We will discuss each of the 9 principles and connect them with local prevention efforts as we go. Many of us will sometimes be so excited by a strategy or program that we will jump right in without being sure that it's a good fit for us to get us where we want to go. However, we have learned from years of prevention work in domestic violence and sexual assault, as well as companion fields such as substance abuse and teen pregnancy prevention, that collaboratively developed specific measurable goals and outcomes can really help to guide our work. So when we begin thinking about prevention in action and the different types of prevention efforts, there are several considerations to keep in mind. First, let's go over the difference between a prevention activity, strategy, and program. An activity is a process, tool, event, technology, and/or action required to implement a strategy. Activities may include products like brochures, informational materials, services such as a training or an event, and infrastructure. While activities are a step in the right direction, an activity alone is not usually enough to achieve intended outcomes. A strategy is an approach intended to reduce behaviors such as social skills training, mentoring, social marketing, or policy changes. These approaches often include multiple activities that together are intended to achieve goals or results at a specific level of the social ecology. While the activities may not target the same population, they all must address the same risk and protective factors. Stand Up Speak Up might be an example of a complex strategy with media components and engagement components working with youth as influencers. And finally, a program is the combination of several complementary strategies designed to deliver reinforcing messages to one or more populations in a variety of settings on the same level of the social ecology. An example of a strategy transforming into a program would be the 4th R Healthy Relationships curriculum. The 4th R includes strategies at the individual level to reach students with the school-based curriculum, as well as newsletters to educate parents, and informational materials, training, and ongoing support for school staff on program delivery and school policies. All of the approaches are used to impact and reinforce the same approach and messages. If the 4th R was only being used in the classroom with no other support, this would not be considered a program. Programs, when they are a good fit, are implemented well and are thought to be the most far-reaching and effective. In the last 2 modules, we showed how the PIES framework could be used to develop a process for mobilizing communities to take on prevention. We can adapt the PIES framework in order to create a process for developing programs that will help us to prevent domestic violence and sexual assault in our communities. Within the planning phase before implementing, it is important to choose activities, strategies, or programs that will actually help us to achieve our goals and outcomes. There are several considerations with this. While planning, we may have identified the underlying issue that we are hoping to address. With our goals and outcomes, we probably identified specific groups, populations, or systems we might want to work with or within, and have pulled out some more specific protective factors that we hope to build within those settings or groups. This will help us find a strategy to fit this audience. In Module 5, we discussed how to identify our goals, the population we want to reach, and our desired outcomes. This is where we think about what our perfect world would look like with regards to the problem that we identified in the previous step. If everything goes according to plan, what do we hope to accomplish? What will our community look like? Who will have been affected through our efforts? This will serve as another criteria to match our proposed strategies or program against. Next, it's time to do a little bit of research. We figured out what specific problem to address and what changes we want to see in our community. Now, we should see if anyone else has tried to address the same issue with the same target population successfully, and find out what the evidence base is for strategies. Based on that, we can determine what existing programs and best practices are worth replicating. There's no sense in reinventing the wheel. If there is a strategy that has worked to support a similar outcome in a similar community or state, it might be worth considering implementing that strategy. However, it does not always make sense to use exactly the same strategy, since there may be community or population differences, or the setting might have a different dynamic. Once we've found a program that might suit our needs, we want to think about the difference between our community and the settings in which it has been successfully implemented. We may want to think about how we can keep the essential core components and adapt the strategy to suit our own needs. Maybe we like the design of a program, but we are concerned about whether all of the content is a good fit, or if the activities are well suited to the number of individuals involved with the program. We can take basic elements of the original program and keep the essential pieces, but make some adaptations for the fit and context of our community and audience. The fourth R is a good example of a program that has been modified for use statewide in Alaska. The fourth R was originally developed in Canada, and there was ample evidence to support the effectiveness of the program. The fourth R seemed to be more or less a good fit, but some alterations needed to be made before it could successfully be implemented in Alaska. Some role-play videos that were part of the curriculum were distinctly Canadian in language and in the pieces that address historical trauma. They were also urban in nature, making them less relevant to most Alaskans. New role-play videos were created by prevention professionals and Alaskan youth to develop new scenarios which would resonate better with Alaskan students. The new content and videos are provided to Alaska teachers. Another consideration of the planning process is our capacity to implement programming. With each strategy or program, there are implications for money, staffing, sustainability, and other factors which will determine if we are able to successfully implement them. We may want to implement a strategy or program, but may only be able to start with an activity that can help us work toward a strategy or a program. So if we have the resources we need, such as partner and community support, funding, staffing, a location, and other essentials, we may be ready to get started. If we aren't able to get all of these things together, our program won't be stable, and if that's the case, we may need to wait and work on capacity building before getting started or choose an alternate strategy. For example, in many communities and statewide, there is an interest in systemically addressing barriers to health and safety, which include considering intersecting social contexts of racism, sexism, and classism. After doing the research, there may be a few packaged programs that fit all of our needs, and when we gauge readiness to do this, we may see that there are some introductory steps that we'll need to take first. This may include generating more meaningful conversations, developing tools, or combining promising programs that are available nationally and adapting them for Alaska. There are many steps to take before we are ready to really solidify our strategy or program. We may need to build capacity within our own organizations, with partner organizations, or shift norms before we can successfully implement strategies. We may need to apply for funding, identify trained staff, or do other steps before beginning the implementation process. So now that we have considered our options in terms of programming, the necessary adaptations to fit our community and settings, and the capacity of our organization and partners in implementing our strategy, then there are just a couple more steps before diving in. To avoid misunderstandings when working collaboratively, it is important to action plan or operationalize the strategy. This is when we are going to assign roles, figure out the specific content of our program, the space or spaces we will be using, and what our schedule is for the duration of the program or strategy. We will have all of these things clearly outlined and agreed upon before we start implementing anything. It is very important that there is full participation so that there is not only one person or organization implementing. Now, with our action plan in place, we're really eager to get started, but we still have one more step. We and our stakeholders need to think about how we're going to evaluate our prevention efforts. We will go into this in greater depth in Module 7, but in order to be able to improve upon our strategies, we need to have data on how it was implemented and what the outcomes were. Once all that is taken care of, it's finally time to implement. Now that we have our strategy all planned out, now it's time to take action and implement it. How you choose to implement is up to you based on what you are planning to do and local context. But by now, your implementation partners and steps should be clearly outlined to implement the strategy in your community. Then, since we have already outlined our evaluation steps prior to implementation, we can put our evaluation plan into action and learn more about how well things went and the difference that we made. Again, this will be discussed in the next module. Finally, we need to consider how to keep successful programs going. Hopefully, we designed our program with sustainability in mind and prepared for any curveballs that might come our way. Throughout planning and implementation, documentation of processes is key. We will also want to make sure that our resources are secure for the next iteration of the program by doing some grant writing, making sure that our staff have time for it, and recruiting any volunteers we might need. After that, we cycle back to the beginning. As we make our way back to the beginning of the cycle, we should keep the idea of continuous quality improvement in mind. This refers to the process of retracing old steps and taking some new ones so that we can develop a more effective program. Once we've conducted our evaluations, we can figure out what areas of our programming went well, what fell short of our targets, and how we could alter the program for a better chance of success the next time around. Let's take a look at LEADON for Peace and Equality to see what continuous quality improvement looks like. Using both process and outcome data from LEADON, the network saw that LEADON made an impact. However, when looking at the community projects that the youth had planned at the conference, the network saw that not all communities were carrying out their projects. So, network staff spoke with participants and tried to assess what support was needed or what planning tools or resources were required so that youth would have success with their projects. After examining these interviews, the network realized that youth who had a highly engaged adult mentor attend LEADON with them may be one of the indicators of youth following through on projects. The network additionally learned that the more contact there was with the adults and youth, the better chance that they would have to complete a project. Lastly, it helped LEADON planners refine some of the workshops and planning tools. Knowing this, these pieces were incorporated into LEADON in subsequent years. So the PIES framework provides some concrete steps for community prevention planning, but it still might feel like a daunting task to design successful primary prevention strategies. And while there is a growing evidence base of tried and tested strategies, there may be times when you determine you must develop or adapt existing strategies. The 9 principles of prevention have been consistently found in effective prevention approaches and can help when designing your strategies for the greatest probability of success. First, we will want to make sure that we are taking a comprehensive approach to prevention. Ideally, we want to work across multiple levels of the social ecology and reinforce the same skills and messages in many arenas. For example, let's look at the Sitka Youth Leadership Committee, or SILC, sponsored by Sitkans Against Family Violence. SILC is a group of youth leaders who work to create positive social change in Sitka. SILC has engaged in many activities which impact different areas of the social ecology, including creating public service announcements for use in local media outlets and organizing discussions, workshops, and social events for youth in Sitka. These strategies impact the individual, influencer, and community levels of the social ecology by strengthening knowledge and skills within its membership, working with peers through workshops and discussions, and impacting the community climate in the 3 high schools and Sitka as a whole through social norms campaigns. The next thing that we should keep in mind when designing prevention programming is to incorporate varied teaching methods. Everyone has their own preferred style of learning. Some people absorb information better with some sort of action involved, such as moving or speaking, while others might rely on visuals or interpret what they have learned with art, while some retain information through discussions. We should strive to appeal to all of these learning styles so that we can keep our participants engaged and reduce the risk of leaving anyone behind. Research finds that information presented in one format is unlikely to have long-term impact. The LEADON Mini-Summit is a great example of using varied teaching methods to promote learning and skill building. During LEADON, youth attend workshops that approach prevention topics in a variety of ways, including discussion, art, dance, role plays, and games. Although the conference only lasts for 3 days, youth return to their communities feeling that they have benefited from being at LEADON because the variety of topics and the way they are presented offer something for everyone. Another critical component of effective prevention programming is to make sure that participants get a sufficient dosage of the program. Let's say that we're looking to get into shape and decide that we're going to start exercising. Will it do us any good to exercise just one time? Probably not. If we want to improve our physical well-being, we want to develop a routine. Prevention works much in the same way. Our participants might not get a whole lot from limited exposure to prevention strategies. The longer that they are exposed to our strategies, the better. So, we're going to need to put a lot of thought into things like the number of sessions we want to have, how long we want those sessions to be, the spacing of the sessions, the total duration of the program, and any follow-up that we might want to do. Let's take one more look at the 4th R. The 4th R is very involved in terms of dosage. Students participate in 21 to 30 sessions, which occur regularly according to the school's schedule. By having such a high number of sessions, the material is constantly being reinforced, so youth will be more likely to remember it, as opposed to a one-shot, single-day strategy. Next, designing our strategies with theory in mind is also very important. When we are in the development stages, we should be able to back up what we plan to do with scientific or logical justification. We should use theory as a backbone for our programs and find a practical way of packaging that theory applied to domestic violence and sexual assault to our participants. Diffusion of innovation suggests that there are popular opinion leaders in communities that influence and shape the norms. This process works at different paces for different people depending on their own personal outlook. This curve explains what we can expect when we try to put forth the idea of prevention in our communities using one lens. We can expect that it could be a little slow going at first, but once we have some of those well-connected early adopters on board and get them engaged with prevention, we can expect that more people will realize how beneficial it is to their community and support DVSA prevention work. Much of our norm work is framed around this approach, including Alaska Men Choose Respect, where healthy men are promoting respect and healthy relationship norms and are supported by companion campaigns and programs. If you are interested in learning more about behavior change, please refer to the Module 6 companion materials. Establishing and supporting positive relationships during the implementation of primary prevention strategies is another key to success. Domestic violence and sexual assault are very sensitive topics, as we well know. If we want our participants, especially if they are youth, to engage and get the most out of our programming, we need to establish a safe environment for them. We and any other adults working with the program should make a point to foster stable, positive relationships between ourselves and youth participants, and then encourage them to model those strong, positive relationships with each other and establish trust within the group. Appropriate timing is another important factor to consider. We need to keep our audience in mind when we are considering what issue we want to address and how we want to approach it. Let's say, for example, that a local school has reported multiple incidences of dating violence, and the folks at the local shelter have partnered with the school to deliver a healthy relationships curriculum. We need to think about whom we want to deliver this information to strategically so that we're making sure that we're addressing violence before it occurs, while also presenting it at a time that makes sense developmentally. We don't want to implement this curriculum too early in the youth's development because they might not be able to relate to the material. But if we're too late, we won't necessarily be preventing violence because youth may have already developed their own means for handling conflict in dating situations. So, we need to think carefully about what the perfect balance might be. Let's consider Girls on the Run, an empowerment program for girls ages 8 to 14, which is currently being implemented in a handful of Alaskan communities. The program serves to encourage the development of healthy lifestyle choices, such as exercise, good eating habits, positive body image, and healthy relationships. The timing of Girls on the Run is critical. The program seeks to instill those skills prior to the onset of adolescence, before external factors such as peer pressure and the impact of mass media can have an impact on girls' self-image and self-worth. Social and cultural relevance are of particular importance to primary prevention strategies here in Alaska. Culture is an important part of life up here, and when we incorporate it into prevention, culture and grounded identity are a protective factor. On the flip side of the coin, we should also consider how culture might be a barrier to participation in our programs and how we can overcome them. An infusion of culture into prevention benefits the Teens Lead Ahead camp put on by youth leaders in the YK Delta region. Teens Lead Ahead incorporates traditions, elders, subsistence activities, and Yupik knowledge, which are a regional strength and protective factor. Now let's think about social relevance. Coaching Boys into Men is a program which has the coaches of men's high school athletic teams integrate lessons on respect and gender equality into their practices. These messages resonate with the team because they are coming from a role model, someone they look up to and respect. We have already gone over the importance of evaluation earlier, but it bears mentioning again. Conducting an outcome evaluation not only allows us to know if we are really creating the impact that we set out to, but it allows us to do continuous quality improvement so that we can be sure that even if we didn't get the results we wanted the first time around, we have the information we need to strengthen our strategies in future iterations of the program. You can view some examples of strong outcome evaluations in the companion materials. Again, we will cover this topic in Module 7. And finally, when it comes to execution, we as staff members and anyone else who is helping implement our programming will need to be adequately prepared. We not only need to feel comfortable with the material and competent in delivering it, but also we need to be enthusiastic in our approach and sensitive to others' needs so that our participants are more likely to buy into the programming. Much of the information included in this module may have already been a part of your process or programs and is now a part of your training. It is worth considering what assumptions and understanding your collaborative has about the various aspects of choosing, implementing, and evaluating prevention strategies. Building capacity around prevention planning and implementation will increase your success in sustaining prevention efforts in your community. That wraps up our 6th module. For more information on what you have just learned, be sure to check out the Module 6 section of the companion materials. Next up in Module 7, we will demystify evaluation, going over some basic terminology and how it figures into the success of prevention efforts.